just said what you think. You've just given us your view, which is that it's nothing to do with Islam. And other people will have a view that it is. But I'm suggesting that as a society, we actually take the time to work out people's motives. But it's very clear that in your case, for instance, you wouldn't want it to be ascribed to an Islamic motive. Even if it was turned out that he had a copy of the Quran in the car, you would say it had nothing to do with Islam.
We would have accepted that.
Hello, welcome back again to another interesting video where Douglas Murray is one of the speakers. So guys, the title of this video is, are we right to give terrorists the oxygen of publicity? Wow, I believe this is going to be an interesting one. So no further talking, let's dive into it and check it out.
See Douglas Murray tell the truth as it is. Douglas Murray debates a panel of Muslim scholars on the influence of religion, particularly Islam, in the West today. Douglas Murray speaks what is on most people's mind today in the West, but what most are afraid to say. Douglas Murray did not hold back.
Douglas, on the one hand, you're saying, look, we don't want to cower to the terrorists, we don't want to be singing their agenda, and yet the first thing everybody uses is the word Islam. Well, listen, in this particular state, I was actually in Scotland Yard on this case, so I was there on the day. To qualify as an Islamist incident, it has to fit a certain criteria. And it was discussed earlier on, but no one actually mentioned why this was classed and why it was taken over by SO15 as an Islamic incident. Otherwise, it would have just been homicide that would have taken over this case. There are certain criteria. For instance, if he said the word Allahu Akbar, that would have been clearly an Islamist incident. If he had had a flag of ISIS, clearly it would have been Islamic. He didn't have any of those. He didn't say anything. He didn't leave a note. The only thing that makes this a counter-terrorism
he was a Muslim.
No, not even that. It was because he wasn't we don't know if he was a practicing Muslim, because he clearly wasn't a very good Muslim, was the
What does
fact
that mean? What does a very good Muslim mean?
Well, if he was taking cocaine, he was into, wife bashing, all those things. If he was a Muslim, he wouldn't be taking cocaine and having, drinking alcohol. But it was because he attacked, let me just finish the point. The reason was because he attacked a political institution, the heart of government. That was one of the reasons, if you like, that qualified it. He's in terms of practicing, that's still coming out. We don't know whether...
Well, you've just said what you think. You've just given us your view, which is that it's nothing to do with Islam. And other people will have a view that it is. But I'm suggesting that as a society, we actually take the time to work out people's motives. But it's very clear that in your case, for instance, you wouldn't want it to be ascribed to an Islamic motive. Even if it was turned out that he had a copy of the Quran in the car, you would say it had nothing to do with Islam.
We would have accepted that.
There are people, let me finish the point. And there are people who would say it has something to do with Islam, even if it's very clear that it has nothing to do with Islam. But there are, in this whole thing, my simple point is that we should be looking at the motives, and at the moment there are parts of the anti-terrorism and counter-extremism strategy where the government is, and politicians are very worried about treading on it. And you saw it, as was mentioned earlier, in Theresa May's comments in the House this week, where she immediately ruled one aspect of this whole thing.
Douglas Murray's stance on probing the religious motivations behind terrorist attacks, particularly those related to Islam, is a critical and often overlooked perspective in the contemporary discourse on terrorism and security. Murray rightly criticizes the reluctance of media outlets and political figures to thoroughly examine the role that Islamic ideology may play in such atrocities. This avoidance, he argues, is primarily due to a fear of offending Muslim communities, which can hinder a full understanding and effective response to the threat. Firstly, it's important to note that the reluctance to discuss the religious motivations behind some terrorist attacks can lead to an incomplete narrative. For instance, research by the University of Maryland's Global Terrorism Database reveals that a significant proportion of global terrorist attacks have been perpetrated by groups or individuals with radical Islamist motives. This statistic is not to generalize or stigmatize all followers of Islam, but to acknowledge that, like any ideology, parts of its interpretation can lead to radicalization. Moreover, scholars like Sam Harris and Mayajid Nawaz have highlighted the necessity of distinguishing between the peaceful majority of Muslims and the radical fringes. In their book, Islam and the Future of Tolerance, they argue for a candid discussion about the aspects of Islamic doctrine that jihadists use to justify their actions. This discussion, they posit, is essential not only for countering terrorism, but also for empowering reformist elements within Muslim communities. A Pew Research Center study on religious beliefs and violence found varying perspectives among Muslim communities globally, with significant minorities in several countries justifying suicide bombings and other forms of violence against civilians in defense of Islam. Ignoring these viewpoints does not eliminate them. Rather, it potentially allows for their growth unchecked by critical discussion and debate. It is essential to advocate for open, honest dialogue about all aspects of terrorism, including religious motivations. This approach not only aids in the accurate assessment and strategy formation against threats, but also protects the wider Muslim community from unjust collective blame.
So when you speak about journalism and accuracy, of course, and we all want the truth. It's not just you.
I disagree
it's me.
that we all want the truth.
Okay, so let me tell you for myself, and I can speak on behalf of perhaps 99% of the British Muslim public, that generally none of us know the motives behind people who carry out these acts. I myself am very much part of this society. I'm born and raised a Londoner. I'm an observant Muslim, and you don't see somebody like me carrying out these acts inspired by my faith. Therefore,
that doesn't mean that the people who do it
I'm not saying I'm not, and people are analysing scripture. It's not whether it's the Quran or the biblical scripture. You seem to be quite hung up on the fact that this is a Quranic scriptural point.
Scriptures are open to interpretation, and literally.
If they're not quoting scripture, why are we bringing scripture into this? If they're not quoting scripture,
because a lot of them quote the verses that say, "Find the infidels, root them out, and kill them."
I debate these.
Douglas wanted to come in. Douglas,
come on. This is a great example of it right here. Mr. Andalusi thinks that none of the terrorists ever quote the Quran. Flat out wrong. Flat out wrong. Let me give you one example. You mentioned it earlier, the killers of Lee Rigby. Michael Adelajo, on his body, when the police arrested him, he had a note in his pocket to his young daughter explaining why he did what he did. It's all on the public record. You can see the facsimile on the BBC's website, and he has footnotes throughout it of Quranic verses that he explains justify, in his view, his actions. Now, that's the beginning. Hang on, let me finish my point before the proselytization begins, okay? Let me just finish my point. That would seem to me to be, therefore, a very clear occasion, never mind the thousands of others we could list worldwide, a very clear occasion on this country when one of our soldiers was murdered on our streets, where clearly Scripture had something to do with it. So the problem that a lot of us have is we are willing to discuss the drugs bit, we're willing to discuss the foreign policy bit, we're willing to discuss all this. Why are you not willing to concede that there is a religious element? Sometimes.
No, wait.
We are missing the main point.
Mohammed first. Now, listen, here's my plan. Wait a minute, everyone's...
Douglas Murray's assertion that there is a religious component in many terrorist attacks, which stems from certain interpretations of the Quran, is an uncomfortable yet crucial point that demands honest examination. While the vast majority of Muslims worldwide live peacefully and do not subscribe to radical views, extremists often use specific Quranic texts to justify their violent actions. Understanding these interpretations is not about blaming a religion as a whole, but about recognizing the complexities within it that can be exploited by radicals. One commonly cited verse is Surah At-Tawbah, often referred to as the verse of the sword. Extremist groups interpret this verse as a command to kill non-believers until they convert to Islam or pay a tax in submission, unless they are part of a treaty. It's important to note, however, that many scholars and mainstream Muslims argue that this verse is historically contextual, intended only for a specific time and not as a general command. Another verse, Surah Al-Baqarah, instructs Muslims to kill them wherever you overtake them, in reference to fighting against persecution. Radicals may interpret this as a broad license for violence, whereas traditional teachings emphasize its context of self-defense during persecution. These verses, among others, are prime examples of how religious texts can be interpreted in vastly different ways. Groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda take these verses out of their historical and scholarly contexts to bolster their ideological narratives and recruit followers under the guise of religious...
What an interesting debate, what an interesting one. So I'm going to repeat the title again. Are we right to give terrorists the origin of publicity? So he was just trying to make us to understand that religious contents really played a role in the society. You know, like a lot of people might just take out some words from the Quran, and they might just try to use it for their own selfish desire or for their own selfish motive. So guys, from the video we just watched, you guys can really see that the Muslim that was present, he was just trying to, you know, to tell the audience that that the Muslim is a very, very peaceful religions. Okay, they are not a terrorist, they are not a terrorist. So for the fact that they are Muslims and they are peaceful, that does not mean that is everyone that is peaceful or in that Muslim religions. So I believe that Douglas Murray, he also accepted the fact that a lot of people have their own way of interpreting the Quran. Yeah, because, you know, somehow I believe the Quran might just make this particular point, and some people might just translate it in another different angle, in another different purpose. So there is this particular verses in the Quran that encourage violence, and a lot of the Muslims have been using that particular passage. So he was just trying to, you know, to let the audience know that particular verses, that particular angle that talks about violence in the Quran, that it was used for another purpose in that certain period. And a lot of the present Muslims, they are interpreting that particular place in another different angle, in another different interpretation, you know. Or people have their own way of interpreting things, people have their own way of reasoning things. Okay, not the way Mr. A analyzed things, that Mr. B analyzed things. So people see things in a different angles, in a different ways, in a different perspective, and sometimes their reasoning, their thinking might not even relate to what that object or what that passage is actually talking about. They are just going to translate these various things in a way that will suit them, in a way that will you know, in a way that will be suitable for them. So that is how a lot of people behave. So guys, I believe that particular verses where most of the terrorists use, you know, Douglas Murray just analyzed that particular verses, that it was used for a particular time, for a particular period, to address some certain issues, yes, as of that time. And a lot of the terrorists, they are not using it. So I believe that the world is quite peaceful to compare to the time of Muhammad. Yes, the world is very, very peaceful now. I believe there was a lot of fight, a lot of war during those period. And right now, I believe that the world is very, very peaceful now to compare to before. So guys, to me, I think they should review that particular verses again. I'm not saying that particular verses is bad. Yes, I'm not saying it's bad, but I think they should review it more, you know, to clarify, to clarify some of these people that misunderstood what that particular verse was trying to say, so that they can, know more or learn more about what that verses was actually saying. Okay, because I believe it's going to help a lot of people. It's not everyone that can read something and interpret it rightly. Yes, some people will read something and they are just going to interpret it in a different way. They are just going to interpret it in a different angles. And when you listen to the interpretation will not even relate to what that particular verses is saying. So I think if they should review that particular verses again, so that a lot of people we know the truth. Even some of the people that believe that have this mindset that a Muslim is for that Muslim doesn't love peace. I believe by the time they review most of these verses, is going to clarify a lot of people that don't believe in a Muslim, a lot of people that say that okay, that Muslim are being known for arrogance. So when they review this thing, is going to clarify a lot of things. Okay, Muslim, just like what he said that Muslim is a very, very peaceful religion, and I have seen a lot of Muslims that are peaceful. Yes, I have seen a lot. So it's just some set of people that translate that particular that particular version to a different thing. So guys, I'm really so excited sharing this video with you, and I hope you guys find this video to be very, very interesting. So guys, you let me know what you think about this video in the comment section, and I will really appreciate every bit of that. So guys, stay tuned and see you all in my next one. Bye.